And you don't seem to understand. A shame you seemed an honest man.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Layer 6 of Serial Episodes Lain of Lost in Translationmon. I'm May.
And I'm Jay.
And we enjoyed this episode because we memed a lot the whole time.
It was really funny. Really
Unintentionally funny.
By no active intention of the makers of the show, I'm sure. I bet they wanted the whole thing to be really serious and down to earth,
Yeah,
or up in the air, whatever. But it was really funny.
And before we get too much into our opinions of this episode, first of all, we'll just do a quick recap of what happened in the last episode.
Oh crap!
A recap. So
what happened?
It's okay. I wrote it down, Jay.
Thank God.
I prepared because every other month we've been like, what did happen? So this time I came prepared, and before the show I jotted down what happened in Layer 5. So Lain's sister was experiencing weird events due to the knights who were following Lain. Lain was also being weird, and she was more interested in the wired, but she was also possibly hallucinating discussions with some dolls in her room and her father.
You have them listed as knights. Is it because they call themselves knights, or because we assumed they were? Because we learned in this episode that they are not.
The people who were sending weird messages to Lain's sister, I assumed.
Oh no, those were the knights. You're right. Yeah.
The weird ones, yeah.
Okay.
No, previously we had thought that the men in black were knights, and we learned in this episode that they are not knights.
Up until today, we thought that.
Yeah. So Lain is basically asking questions from these things she's hallucinating, including creepy doll in her room and father. And even though we get some focus on Lain, mainly this episode was focused on Lain's sister, and Lain seemed more part of the background and what was happening in the background. And it was kind of nice to have focus on another character, even if it made no sense and wasn't really explained all that much.
Present day. Present time.
So on to this episode. Lain makes friends with knights in the wired, and when she goes to school, her real life friends are confused and concerned about why Lain's acting this way, because she seems like she's acting like she used to before when she was very, I guess, withdrawn is the word.
Yeah, and she's like, no, I'm not alone. I've got tons of friends on the internet.
Yeah.
That's where all my friends are. And when she says this, one of her friends looks actively afraid. And she's like, you can't have real friends on the internet. I'm a housewife from 2002.
Yeah, well, I guess that's also the timing of it. Having friends on the internet, people said, oh, you can never have a relationship with someone online that you can with real people or people you know in real life.
This is, and it's good that they have other characters saying, no, it's fine, you obviously can, but it shows one of those bits where they're doing a really good job of predicting the future of how integrated technology will be, and that's one of the key things about Lain that I don't think we give it very much credit for. As such, because we live in the world we live in now, so it's not a predictive force. It's a lot of it reflects so accurately that we just take it as normal.
Yep.
But it's funny that it got so integrated in society, and yet you still have kids who are growing up with it saying stuff like this.
Yes.
Which shows that the society has not progressed to the point that should match the level of technology. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, and that's something that I guess, it does well, but it's also, I don't think it ages necessarily well, because it takes everyone's frame of mind that they were in, when this anime came out, when the game of the anime came out, when the whole manga came out and everything, it sort of takes everyone's frame of mind from when it was released, which I believe was, I wouldn't say more than 15 years ago. So everyone was sort of scared.
So 2002?
I
was
think
the
so.
90s.
I think it might have been around the same time as Tamers. Maybe. So,
because what's funny about this is that you think about it and you go, okay, well, maybe people don't catch on so fast. People still do that nowadays. But people accept the fact that kids, these 11-year-old kids are going to nightclubs. Clearly, society has moved on in some respects and not in other respects.
Okay, it was released in 2001.
Wow, all right. Well,
yeah, so
good.
It's not super old. But it is during that time where people were sort of a bit scared of the internet and what the internet could provide. But anyway,
it was acceptable in the noughties.
Yeah. So we see some kids who are praising the sun. They're lifting their arms up, which was meme number 1, which was that
rise.
It's the Elmo on the cake, and it just says rise because Elmo is terrifying.
And then this happens a bunch of times, but honestly, we don't have to talk about it again because it goes nowhere.
Yeah. Well, this this is when Lain is in the city with her friends, and then Lain looks up and she's like the clouds part and there's just her naked body there.
In Monty Python and the Holy Grail style, she appears like a god.
Yeah.
And then they all appear to see it and they go, what's going on?
Yeah, because Alice sees it, her friend.
And then after that, it disappears and it was not really there and it was imagination. And they never talk about it
never
again.
mentioned again. So it could possibly also be just Lain hallucinating. Because remember, in the first episode, there were a lot of weird things that were going on in Lane's head.
Don't you love when they kill time with nonsense that doesn't matter and doesn't mean anything?
Yeah. Well, I guess
Right.
that seems to be what they're doing a lot in this anime. So then when she goes to the wide, when she gets home, and Jay brought up a very good point when we were watching this. Would you like to tell the listeners what your point was?
Was it about how everything was really giant?
No, it was about
Okay.
how does she afford all this?
So her room is completely full, and I believe it's one of the only things I've ever heard about Lain, right? Is the experience people have of walking into Lane's room and seeing all the machinery, right?
Yeah.
And that's a shock value.
And the
that's
floor's
very
wet.
That's very interesting. And the floor's wet in this case because her cooling system is busted.
Hmm.
And her entire room is full of machinery, right? So before she just opened it up and she'd been getting little bits and pieces, and now all of a sudden it's like a factory inside. It's wall to wall machinery. And the question is, how did she get this much stuff into her room? How did she afford it all? She's a child. She hasn't been spending her dad's money here because he seems surprised by it as well. He doesn't know about it. How did she get it in there without anyone knowing about it? How did she install all of it? How did she have the technical know-how? You know, knowledge is one thing because she could figure that out with the internet. That's the whole point. But there is a money factor here. There's a power factor where like the house's electric bill would probably have tripled at least.
Yep.
And then I was talking to you also thematically about how it's one of the things that they do badly when they look forward into the future is the idea of technology sort of taking over a wider space, because they didn't consider the fact that when technology advances, it also gets smaller. So keeping in mind that everything that room is doing, that huge amount of apparatus, did not properly predict what a Core i7 can do.
Yeah.
And a Core i7 is smaller than your palm.
Yeah. Well, it was that whole thing of like, oh, things are going to be really, really big. And then I remember when I was a little bit older, in like, I guess maybe the end of primary school, so maybe when I was in year 6 or maybe year 5 or maybe the start of high school, maybe year 7, was everyone thought things were going to start getting smaller. Because phones were getting smaller. And now we're at this weird sort of stage where like, okay, things are big. Like the things in our pockets are big, but our computers are small, but also they can be big.
No, because the only thing that gets bigger is the width and height of screens.
Yeah, because screens are important. But everyone always says, oh yes, the computer, like this. I remember lots of people saying this when as I said, when I was towards the end of primary school or at the start of high school, when people said that in 10 years, computers are going to be the size of our fingernails.
They technically are.
Yeah, I know, but no, people said, okay, and we'll be looking at it and we'll be able to see everything on the fingernail. I'm like, well, why would you want a screen that small?
Well, I think that is something that will happen eventually when it starts getting...
If it's in our brain.
Yeah, exactly. When it starts getting implemented into you, then it can be as small as you want. It doesn't matter. We're at a weird point, right, where screens are important still, and eventually we will transition out of that.
Yeah, because we still need to see things, but the things inside... inside an iPhone, it's quite empty.
That's what AR stuff will do.
I'm so excited for AR.
Or when VR isn't chunky like that. When VR is much smaller, like sunglasses.
I think AR will be better than VR, because VR, I don't know, just AR seems more useful. Even though VR you can use for more than just games, I feel like AR will be more useful in our day-to-day life.
You're thinking because VR completely takes you out of the world?
Yes, and I feel like AR will still be, like, you'll be able to, like, you'll be sitting at your desk and you'll, like, your computer will be what you're seeing. And then you can, like, look around and do things. I feel like AR is the future. But we're not actually on to the discussion part of this.
The
We
whole
have
point
to
of
go through
this,
synopsis.
this is a
Yeah.
discussion of Lain. It's about its themes and
About
what it gets
technology,
right and
yeah.
what it gets wrong. This is one of the core discussions of Lain that makes it a good show. Because honestly, if you're focusing on this show for its plot, you are not in a good place for it. And we're 6 episodes in, and it's got a bare bones. It doesn't have a skeleton so much as it has a rubber glove stretched over a skeleton, right?
Yeah, but we have like little bits of plot. Like we get plot in this episode, and we got plot I think last in episode I want to say 3, and we've had bits and pieces ever since. But
I think I've picked something up about this plot in advance that they didn't want me to know.
oh, that's not good.
No. Like I think they were like laying the seeds down. I could be totally wrong, right? But this is like obnoxious synopsis Lain style.
Laning the seeds.
Yeah. So I think they were like putting the seeds down so they could refer back to it later. but I think I just picked it up in this episode, and hopefully I'm right.
What is it?
It's I told it to you a few times while we were watching, and if we see it forward a little bit, when they're talking about this experiment, the KID system experiment, where they were dealing with all these kids and their ESP thing, and it was all combining into one, and then there was a big explosion.
Yeah.
And then the doctor says all the kids died in the real world.
Yes.
I think what he's saying is they're all alive in the Wired.
Yep.
And I think that they are the Knights. I think all of those kids are the Knights.
Okay.
And they're kids, and they probably went a bit nuts because of the ESP stuff, which is why they're messing with people. And I think that is what's going to be revealed later.
Well, that does make sense, because what we already know is that if you die in real life, you are alive in the Wired.
You can be.
You can be alive in the Wired, because the girl in the first episode who says that she died, she's like, I'm alive in the Wired, and this is where God is.
It's weird, given the way she died, that would happen, unless the whole thing is the Wired is just making a backup of your brain.
I think so. I think it is, because remember that chip that people get implanted in their brain, and like I think that was introduced in episode 4.
I don't think that goes in your brain.
I thought it was. I thought it was like a processor.
No, because there's the one that you swallow and it goes in your stomach, right? And the other one, I think you install in your computer, because she gets it and she puts it in the computer.
Okay, I completely missed that
and
part.
I think that's why she can fully get her whole body into the machine, because it has an extra piece there. And everyone's talking about how powerful she is, but I think it's because her computer's good.
Well, that does put a backup of her, I guess, because she's basically in the Wire at that point.
Yeah.
So when Lane's in the Wired, we see a big mouth that she calls a Cheshire cat, and she's like, oh, that's so lame.
No, you're a crap Cheshire cat.
And this mouth tells her about the serial killer who knows about the game the kids are playing.
Okay, we joked that he was a serial killer. He wasn't a serial killer. He was a child killer.
Yeah.
The difference is that a serial killer is actually a murderer, whereas this was someone who caused an accident in which a lot of children died.
Okay, so he killed children, but yeah, he's not a serial killer. But yeah, we said, I wrote down, so I actually took notes this time.
You wrote down the word I said.
Yeah, so previously we hadn't taken notes, and I felt that means our discussion wasn't as good as it could be. So now I've actually taken notes. But the problem with that is that I'm writing them while I'm watching things. So my notes aren't super like well developed.
That's
and
all right. You got me
upon.
here.
So
I'm backing you up.
I wrote serial killer. He's just a child killer.
And to be fair, it's the way they say is they say the child killer, this guy. Oh yeah, and then they explain it way later.
Yeah.
So you were given the impression that he's a murderer, and we are told by the mouth, and like the only useful information the mouth says, because Lain Googles the guy, the game. She Googles the guy who created it, and she knows all about him. The only thing the mouth tells us is, oh, by the way, he's in hospital and he's dying right now.
Yeah, so she visits him in this wired version of the hospital room and asks him a bunch of questions. And he says how kids was an KID systems is like an experiment where they were testing the psi abilities of children. And this is when he gets like, oh, this is about magic.
Yeah, no, magic is fully real in this universe, because he goes kids, like, children have ESP. That's a thing that children have. But it's light. It's not a big deal. It's just enough to bend metal. Yeah, no, he just says like, oh, just bend a coin. That's not a little ability. That's significant.
I think he's comparing it to the way it's portrayed in media in this universe, which is full psychic ability. It's like, oh no, it's just small ones like bending a coin.
Well, like I said at the time, like, look, it's just Akira. We're just watching Akira now, and like he's basically saying it's not Akira. It's just a little bit.
A little bit. Chotto
Akira. And then they all exploded and died because the experiment went badly. And then he says, oh, look, I deleted all the files.
I smashed the system.
But you can't delete things off the internet, so it got out, and now it's out again. And also,
it was pirated.
I have no more answers for you, and I'm dead.
Yeah, and then he dies.
I have died right now because I was only being kept alive by the secrets I was holding on to.
He basically just goes, guess I'll die.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Guess I'll die.
He delivered the prophecy, and then he died. Like, imagine if Jedi did that in Digimon.
Oh my god, I wish.
Like, imagine if we just done like, oh, I've...
Try would never have happened.
Good point.
Try would have been less confusing, probably. Okay, so he dies, and Lane's like, oh, that's interesting. And that's the end of that plot line for this entire episode.
Yeah, and then, like, we see her, and she's talking to the Knights, and she's being mad at the Knights, and then the men in black are outside, so she runs outside, she says, you're the Knights, aren't you? You're the Knights.
And they're like, get down, and her room explodes, and she's like, what? And she goes, the Knights planted a virus in your computer, and it blew up your cooling system. Also, bye. And they just drive off.
It was a parasite bomb.
Okay, it was a virus.
Yeah. And they just say it was the Knights, and they just drive off, and Lane's like, what?
Which tells, big twist, they're not the Knights. Because the Knights are all those children, I bet.
Yeah, well, like, I can see that being right.
Present day. Present time.
What are your opinions about this episode?
So,
I feel like it was definitely better than the last episode.
stuff happened. You can definitely say that, which is it's a low bar. It's a low bar. The plot existed. Things developed. The animation was quite bad.
I feel like I enjoyed it because we kept on laughing at things.
It was definitely really fun to watch with you.
Yeah, but not for the reasons it should be. Like, we were poking fun at certain bits. Like, there was a scene where we didn't really touch on this, but we see Lane's sister and she's sitting in front of the TV and she's basically, like, I'm not sure if she's, like, unconscious with her eyes open or if she's just daydreaming or if,
I forgot to mention that. Yeah, she looks like she's dead.
Yeah, she looks like she's dead.
She's probably comatose.
Yeah, because she had issues in the last episode, which is fair enough. She was going through some stuff.
I'm still yet to follow whether or not yet to understand if this show is actually difficult to understand or if there are plot threads left open that are never resolved and those are confusing. Because I feel like I have generally quite well followed the basic plot elements of what's going on.
Yeah, I feel like I'm following everything, and there's nothing really like that I feel like I need to rewatch to understand. I feel like so far I'm understanding it fine. Like, I wouldn't say that this is a hard to understand thing. It is slow. Like, it should be the opposite of hard to understand unless we're missing something completely.
What I mean is the things that we do not understand are the things they have gone out of their way to not explain.
Yes.
Such as, how does everyone know who Lain is? How is she important beforehand?
All we know is that she has showed up in the Wire before.
Yeah, which is interesting because she didn't have a computer. Well, she had a crap computer which she didn't use.
Yes, so my theory is regarding that is that it's actually her friend taking her identity.
I think that's way too simple.
Could be just a night. Like, what we know about this universe is that kids are terrifying.
The other option is that if children have a low-level ESP, we are setting up the idea that she has strong ESP that she never lost as being a child.
Yes.
And it's somehow interacting with the wired.
And that's why she's doing the electric things in class in the first episode.
Look, maybe.
That would make sense. I didn't think about that.
They're all possibilities. I still think the Knights of these kids, which I think is meant to be a twist later. I could be totally wrong, but it just fits. It's how I would write the story.
I wouldn't say it's a twist. It's probably something that is a reveal, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's a twist because you're right. Having said it, like that is quite a. It's not a stretch. It makes sense that would be right.
No, like a twist is you expected something and it did not turn out the way you expected. The show sets you up to say all of these kids are dead, and it says it in such a way that they can point back at it later and say it's different. And I know that this is meant to be a surprise because I'm not sure I'm correct. So if it was like it would never come out and be like, no, everyone knew this the whole time. It's meant to shock. If it happens, it was meant to shock.
I think it's fine though. Like, I don't think it's. I don't have a problem with it being the reveal. I think it's fine.
I think it's fine as well. And if that's the case, I can understand in a general sense how the show would get popular in some way because I think a good twist makes shows popular. There, people like that. I could be totally wrong. I'm speaking out my butt here.
Well, the good thing is I'm starting to see why people like this so much. Like, I was like, let's be honest here, I was not looking forward to covering this again. Like 6
episodes later,
the majority of the episodes of Lain aren't particularly interesting, and I know it's the curse that we put upon ourselves for covering it monthly and not like, in hindsight, what we should have done is we should have covered it all in one go and then released monthly.
That's what I told you.
But it would have taken like a full 2 days, a full weekend.
So what? Then we wouldn't have to do this every month.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have to sit down and watch it every month, and maybe we'd be able to follow it better and we'd know be able to give more information, we'd be able to enjoy it more. But I also feel like I just zone out because I'm not good with marathons personally.
All I'm saying is don't present this like it's a new idea when I did tell you we should do that.
I know. No, we've mentioned it before on the podcast, on this podcast, in fact. I just feel like I've always said this from I feel like the first couple of episodes of Lain that this would be better as a movie. If this was an hour and a half.
I don't think the plot of this is so complex and so in depth that it needs more than that amount of time. It's not like a really good example recently, a Death Note. Death Note's a really long show because the intellectual battles that go on have to take place over a period of time, and so much stuff has to get set up for those to be interesting that it takes a long time. This show feels like it has, I think we've said it a bunch of times, it has 5 minutes of content an episode, and then everything else is wheel spinning to be weird.
Yeah.
Weird spinning.
Yeah, no, I see what you're getting at.
Wheeled spinning.
Wheel spinning.
And it's just, it feels unnecessary.
Yeah.
I feel like you could put like an X-Files necessary watch order in here, but it would be like minute segments in each episode.
Yeah, rather than episode. Because you can't just say, oh yeah, you could just take out a few episodes, because that's not the case. I think in every episode there's something that you learn that is important, but I feel like for the most part there's not really. Like, grab a few bits, like show that drug that's affecting people, show that people are going crazy and recognize Lain, show that kids are a little bit strange in this world, show Lain being kind of like really interested in computers and then kind of becoming normal again around her friends, and then becoming like too far gone into the computers and weird again.
Like, there are ratios of stuff you can cut out. Like, in this episode, it's a lot less.
Yeah.
Like, but you'd take that whole weird god in the sky scene out, because it's irrelevant.
Unless it becomes relevant later on.
I can't imagine a way it might be relevant.
Well, maybe the kids that we see aren't really there, and they're just sort of hallucinations, and they're the knights.
And how could that be in any way relevant?
I don't know.
Like, just because she had a vision and it could be told back to you, oh, by the way, that's what that was.
Yeah.
That doesn't actually add anything to the plot at all. You didn't learn anything, and I think it's so vacuous and empty that those scenes couldn't really be anything. You know what? It could be that they have really, really significant metaphorical reasoning for being there.
Yeah.
Sure, maybe the fact that she appears as God means a lot to the director, but it doesn't mean anything to us. Like, we haven't cottoned onto it immediately. And I think that the themes of the show are really strong. So the fact that part is confusing and hard to pass says something about it.
Yeah. As opposed to the last episode we saw, which I feel like you could just grab a couple of minutes from the last episode, because it was, well, what happened? Lain's, and I could be wrong here, I could have missed something, but Lain's sister is kind of almost stalked by the knights and gets messages that are threatening.
That was really all it was.
And we can show like maybe 1 second of Lain talking to a doll or something. But in episode 6, which is the episode we just watched, I feel like most of it you could keep, because most of it actually did show plot. The last bit was a bit wall of texty, but I thought it was fine. And comparatively, this was a good episode to what we've seen. And I feel like, as I said before, I am seeing why people think Lain is so good and say that Lain is so good, and why people enjoy Lain. Like, this is a good start. Half of the series in.
Okay, I think we can wait until the next one, right?
I guess. Like, I guess I'm pretty done with my opinions. Do we have any themes that we notice or similarities to Tamers?
No? Were we meant to?
No, I mean, themes, I guess, would be the whole Wired thing still being kind of weird.
Nah, dude. I mean, it's increasingly digital worldy, because she's actually,
In
you
the
see her
digital
walking
world,
around in it, and it becomes different and all, but also I don't care.
Present day. Present time.
I'm actually looking forward to the next episode.
I mean, you're allowed. No one's going to stop you.
Next month, we'll be watching Leia 07 Society. Do we have any predictions?
It's impossible.
This is a show that's really hard to predict what happens next. Because, like, will we get another episode that we could say would be missed? Or are we going to have the best episode of Lain ever that's going to make us think Lain is the best anime?
The problem is that there is no story structure to this. I was telling May about the 3-act structure of stories, which I'm sure everyone's vaguely familiar with. And usually you sort of get your introduction arc, and then you get like the problems arising and everything. Lain is just kind of wandering through the world, figuring stuff out. And it's impossible to have that story structure when she might be the bad guy. We don't even know.
Yeah.
The show is just a series of curiosities.
Yes.
And the only thing that's meant to keep you on board is not the story, but is just further curiosity for, this is odd. I wonder if it will continue to be odd. Oh, turns out it will.
Well, I'm just hoping that it continues to get better, because this is a very highly acclaimed anime, and I want to know why. And I'm now, we're watching it, and I'm just starting to see why now that it's getting, it's kind of interesting. So I'm looking forward to more.
Yeah, it might actually come together at some point.
Which is good. That's
Maybe.
Good. That's what you want to say about an anime.
That
However,
it might actually be alright.
Is it the 3-4 episodes that you're meant to give an anime?
The Golden 4, whatever it's called. Like,
I don't know if I would have continued after 4 if I wasn't watching. I mean, I might have, just because of curiosity, because of everyone saying it's a good anime. But it's just kind of like, would I continue watching it after 4 if I didn't have to cover it? I don't think so, but maybe it's hard, because like I succumb to peer pressure. Everyone's saying this is a good anime. I'm like, okay, I guess I should watch it then.
personally, I actually I feel like my time is limited, so I only ever give 2. For example, yesterday I gave up up on Kisniver after 2. Because even though I love Studio Trigger, it turns out that just because they're animating something doesn't mean the show's any good. And Kisniver is empty. Like, it's got a plot to it, but it's such a, like, mediocre script of, like, look at this weird thing that's thrown together for no reason. Okay, you're in a situation now with these characters that are whatever. They're literal like anime stereotypes. Like, that's the point of them.
Yeah.
But not in like a funny deconstruction kind of way. Just in a like, we recognize it, but here they are.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm already making you watch 2 seasons of Digimon a week.
Imagine if in Madoka they would be like,
I haven't seen Madoka.
no, but like Madoka's a deconstruction of Magical Girl anime. That's
Yeah,
what it is.
yeah, I know-
You would
I know that
really
much.
like it. I
Yeah,
think.
I've got it on Blu-ray. I just haven't watched it yet.
And so, if in Madoka, rather than it being a big deconstruction of magical girls, they were just like really out there, and one of the characters said, "Look, they're magical girls," because no one actually ever says that in a magical girl
Jay,
anime.
you
But
know-
look, they said it.
Jay, you know I keep my Madoka Blu-ray with all my other adorable anime Blu-rays like K-On! Love Live.
Elfin Lied.
They fit really well together. I just think Madoka is such a cute anime.
It is.
Yeah,
For a little while.
I know how dark it is. I've been spoiled on things because
It's fine.
for some reason I didn't succumb to peer pressure when it came to Madoka. I was kind of like, okay,
It is still a good show, even if you know like the early twists, because it is still just a good show. What?
I know about a death
Okay.
because like the internet memed too hard and spoiled.
Okay, because that's not like a big deal in this show. The show plot is like really awesome and significant outside of that. So you will lose a little bit of a surprise factor, and then you will have a great show despite it.
Yeah. Anyway, so the link dump's linked in the description, and you can contact us and stay updated. You can email us at LostinTranslationmon@gmail.com, or you can comment on this episode or message us on SoundCloud. You can follow us on @TranslationMon on Twitter, and you can find us on Lost in Translationmon on Tumblr, Facebook, and YouTube, and also Instagram, which I haven't mentioned here because this must be an old template, I guess. We have a discussion thread on With the Will and a Reddit thread in the Lain subreddit, and we'd appreciate if you would review us on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast listening service that you use. You can also donate to our Patreon, which can be found linked in the description and in our link dump, and you can do that from as little as $1 a month. And that gets you access to a listener Slack chat group, but there are higher levels with more rewards, such as notes, early episodes, and more.
And thank you to our current Patreon supporters, Sam Krieger, who has a podcast called The Moncast, which talks about Pokemon and Digimon, Stevie, who is Stevie Padamon on Tumblr and is currently taking commissions, Wuching Long, who you can find at twitch.tv/Wuching Long, Metal Mamimon, Joe, Anime Guy, who is Anime Guy Kurosaki and the number 1 on YouTube, Chuckmon, Ishbal Bamba, Hiro Olato, who is at Hiro Olato on Twitter, Jason Morosky, Ryuchi, who's Frostman Radic on Archive of Our Own, Stephen Reeves, who's at Wobbling64 on Twitter, Kaidawashi, Mac, Noam, Riku, Chisai, who you can follow at Chisai236 on Tumblr, Corey, Kyle, Delady Bugman, who's anime blog you can read at bagubaragu.wordpress.com, Small Wolfie, who is on Tapastic as Small Wolfie and has a comic there called Eden of Melancholy, Tom, Glitchgoat, Azrael McCool, Nicholas, Gene Hackmon, Matthew, Anthony, who is at AntoClassic on Twitter, Lisbeth, who is Alekmon on Tumblr, Sithobi, Ellie Vorg, who's Ellie Vorg on Tumblr, Sporky McForkinspoon, Megan, Kyliek, and Neo. Boo!
You can also make a one-off donation on our PayPal, which can be found linked in the description. It's paypal.me/Airjamon. And make sure to let us know for the podcast. See you guys next time. Bye!
Bye!